No! The living one is my son, and the dead one is yours.
But the first woman insisted, "No! The dead child is yours, and the living one is mine." In a time of great kings and vast empires, one man stood above the rest, not for his wealth or power, but for his unmatched wisdom. Solomon, the king of Israel, chose wisdom when God offered him anything he desired, and from that moment, his understanding surpassed the greatest minds of history. King Solomon's wealth and splendor were nothing compared to his wisdom. When God appeared to him in a dream at Gibeon and gave him the chance to ask for anything he wanted, a privilege granted only to King Ahaz of Judah and promised only to the future Messiah, Solomon chose wisdom. He knew that with wisdom, everything else would follow. The scriptures tell us that Solomon's wisdom surpassed that of Ethan the Ezrahite, Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the three sons of Mahol, meaning he was wiser than Abraham, Moses, Joseph, and the generation that wandered in the desert. He was even wiser than Adam, the first man. The 49 gates of wisdom that were open to Moses were also open to Solomon, but the wise king sought to surpass even the great lawgiver. The first proof of his wisdom was given in his verdict in the case of the child claimed by two mothers as their own. Two women who were prostitutes came to King Solomon and stood before him. One of the women said, "My lord, this woman and I live in the same house. I gave birth to a child while she was there. 3 days later, she also gave birth to a child. We were alone in the house. No one else was with us. One night, her son died because she accidentally rolled over him while sleeping. She got up in the middle of the night, took my son from beside me while I was asleep, and laid her dead son in my arms. When I woke up to nurse my child in the morning, I found him dead. But when I looked closely, I realized he wasn't my son." The other woman interrupted, "No! The living one is my son, and the dead one is yours." But the first woman insisted, "No! The dead child is yours, and the living one is mine." So they argued before the king. King Solomon said, "One of you says, 'This is my son who is alive, and the other is dead.' And the other says, 'No. The living one is my son, and the dead one is yours.'" Then the king called for a sword. When it was brought to him, he ordered, "Cut the living child in two and give half to each woman." But the real mother, filled with compassion for her child, pleaded with the king, "Please, my lord, give her the living child. Don't kill him." Meanwhile, the other woman coldly said, "Go ahead, cut him in half, then neither of us will have him." King Solomon then commanded, "Give the living child to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is the mother." When the people of Israel heard about this judgment, they were in awe of the king, recognizing that the wisdom of God was in him to deliver justice. This was the first sign of Solomon's wisdom, showing that God had anticipated such disputes and had ensured that justice would be done. Solomon's advisors, who initially doubted him, soon realized the depth of his wisdom and praised him as a true and just ruler. The conflict had been deliberately allowed by God to reveal Solomon's wisdom. And in reality, the two disputing women were not women at all, but spirits. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you were him? During David's time, when Solomon was still a young boy, he solved a challenging case in a remarkable way. A wealthy man had sent his son on a long business trip to Africa. When the son returned, he discovered that his father had died, and a cunning slave had taken over his father's wealth. The slave had either gotten rid of or scared off all the other slaves and even claimed to be the son of the deceased. The rightful heir presented his case to King David, but without witnesses, there was no way to prove his claim. Solomon, overhearing the case, came up with a clever solution. He ordered the exhumation of the father's body and dyed one of the bones with the blood of each claimant. The slave's blood showed no reaction with the bone, but the true heir's blood soaked into it. This proved who the real son was, and he was able to claim his inheritance. After Solomon became king, he was presented with a strange inheritance dispute. Asmodeus, the king of demons, told Solomon, "You may be the wisest of men, but I'll show you something you've never seen." Asmodeus then stuck his finger into the ground, and out came a man with two heads. This man was a Canaanite, a race that lives underground and is very different from people on the surface. When the Canaanite tried to return to his underground home, he couldn't, and not even Asmodeus could help him. So the Canaanite stayed on earth, married, and had 7 sons, one of whom also had 2 heads. When the Canaanite died, his sons argued over how to divide the inheritance. The double-headed son demanded 2 shares. Neither Solomon nor the Sanhedrin could find a precedent to resolve this unusual case. Then Solomon prayed to God, "O Lord of all, when you appeared to me in Gibeon and gave me a chance to ask for anything, I desired neither silver nor gold, but only wisdom, that I might be able to judge men in justice." God heard his prayer. When the sons of the Canaanite again came before Solomon, he poured hot water on one of the heads of the double-headed monster, whereupon both heads flinched and both mouths cried out, "We are dying! We are dying! We are but one, not 2." Solomon decided that the double-headed son was, after all, only a single being. On another occasion, Solomon devised a case to uncover the truth in a complicated situation. 3 men came before him, each accusing the others of theft. They had been traveling together, and when the Sabbath approached, they stopped to rest and look for a safe place to hide their money, as carrying money on the Sabbath is forbidden. They all hid their money in the same spot, and after the Sabbath ended, they returned only to find it had been stolen. It was clear that one of them must have been the thief, but which one? Solomon said to them, "I know you are all experienced and shrewd businessmen. I'd like your help in resolving a case that the king of Rome has brought to me. In the Roman kingdom, there lived a young woman and a young man who had promised each other under oath that they would not marry anyone without each other's permission. The girl's parents arranged her marriage to a man she loved, but she refused to marry him until her childhood friend gave his consent. She took a large amount of gold and silver and sought him out to offer a bribe. However, setting aside his own feelings for her, he gave his blessing to the couple and refused to accept anything in return. On their way back, the happy couple was confronted by an old highwayman who intended to rob the young man of his bride and his money. The girl told the robber her life story and concluded with these words, "If a young man could restrain his desire for me, how much more should you, an old man, be filled with the fear of God and let us go on our way?" Her words moved the highwayman, and he did not lay hands on either the girl or the money. Solomon addressed the 3 people and said, "I've been asked to decide who acted most nobly among the girl, the young man, and the highwayman. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this." The first person said, "I admire the girl for staying true to her promise." The second person said, "I would praise the young man for controlling his desires and not letting his emotions take over." The third person said, "I respect the highwayman for not taking the money, especially since he would have fulfilled his duty if he had just let the woman go and taken the money." This last response gave Solomon the clue he needed. The person who admired the robber's so-called virtue likely had a desire for the money himself. Solomon had him questioned further, and eventually the man confessed to the theft and revealed where he had hidden the money. Sometimes Solomon's statements and views, though rooted in profound wisdom, appeared strange to the average person. In such instances, the wise king did not hesitate to demonstrate the validity of his opinions. For example, both the educated and the uneducated were provoked by Solomon's assertion, "I have found one man among 1,000, but not a single virtuous woman among them all." Solomon confidently set out to prove he was right. He instructed his attendants to find a married couple known for their integrity and virtue. The husband was summoned before Solomon, who informed him that he intended to appoint him to a high office. However, the king required one condition as a pledge of his loyalty. The man must murder his wife so that he could marry the king's daughter, a bride befitting his new rank. The man, burdened with grief, returned home. His despair deepened at the sight of his beautiful wife and their young children. Though resolved to follow the king's command, he lacked the courage to kill his wife while she was awake. He waited until she was sound asleep, but when he saw the child cradled in her arms, his love as a husband and father reignited. He sheathed his sword, telling himself, "Even if the king offered me his entire kingdom, I could not kill my wife." The next day, he reported his final decision to Solomon. A month later, Solomon summoned the wife and professed his love for her. He told her that their happiness could be fulfilled if she would only dispose of her husband, promising to make her the first wife in his harem. He handed her a leaden sword, which glittered as though it were made of steel. The woman returned home determined to use the sword for its intended purpose. She showed no outward sign of her dark intentions. Instead, she used caresses and tender words to dispel any suspicion her husband might have. That night, she rose, drew the sword, and attempted to kill her husband. The leaden blade, of course, did no harm but awakened her husband, who forced her to confess her wicked plan. The next day, both husband and wife were summoned before the king, who thereby proved to his counselors the truth of his belief that no trust can be placed in a woman. Solomon's wisdom became renowned, attracting many to his court in hopes of benefiting from his knowledge. Among them were 3 brothers who had served him for 13 years. Disappointed by their lack of learning, they decided to leave his service. Solomon offered them a choice. They could each take 100 coins or receive 3 pieces of wise counsel. The brothers chose the money. However, shortly after leaving the city, the youngest brother, ignoring his siblings' objections, hurried back to Solomon. He said, "My lord, I did not serve you to earn money. I sought wisdom. Please take back the coins and teach me instead." Moved by this request, Solomon shared 3 principles of conduct with him. When you travel, start your journey at dawn and rest before nightfall. Never attempt to cross a swollen river, and do not entrust a secret to a woman. The young man rejoined his brothers, keeping Solomon's advice to himself. As they traveled together, they reached a suitable place to spend the night by the 9th hour, 3 hours after noon. Remembering Solomon's counsel, the youngest suggested they stop there. His brothers mocked him, saying his foolishness had begun when he returned the money to Solomon. They continued on their way while the youngest brother set up camp for the night. As darkness fell and the cold intensified, he remained warm and safe, while his brothers, caught in a sudden snowstorm, tragically perished. The next day, he continued his journey, and along the way, he discovered the lifeless bodies of his brothers. After taking their money, he buried them and moved on. When he arrived at a river that was heavily swollen, he remembered Solomon's advice and waited until the flood waters receded. While standing on the bank, he noticed some of the king's servants struggling to cross the river with animals loaded with gold, only to be swept away by the current. Once the waters subsided, he crossed the river and took the gold from the drowned animals. Upon returning home, now both wealthy and wise, he kept his experiences a secret, even from his wife, who was eager to know the source of his newfound wealth. Eventually, her persistent questioning caused him to forget Solomon's warning about revealing secrets to a woman. During a heated argument, his wife accused him, saying, "Not only did you murder your brothers, but you also wish to kill me." This outburst led his sisters-in-law to accuse him of murdering their husbands. He was tried, condemned to death, and narrowly escaped execution by revealing his story to the king, who recognized him as a former servant. Reflecting on this man's experiences, Solomon remarked, "Seek wisdom. She is more valuable than gold, even the finest gold." King Solomon's wisdom was unmatched, a gift from God that enabled him to navigate the complexities of leadership and justice with unparalleled insight. His judgments, whether in matters of state or the most intricate personal disputes, have left a legacy that continues to inspire awe and wonder. From uncovering the truth in the case of the 2 mothers, to outwitting foreign rulers and solving the riddles posed by Hiram and the Queen of Sheba. By the way, let me know in the comments below if you want to hear the story of how he met the Queen of Sheba and how she questioned his wisdom.
If you enjoyed this story and looking forward to more amazing ones, please hit the like and subscribe button and let us know in the comments what country you're watching this from.